Hey, thanks for tuning in. This is episode number 2 of the Jake for the State podcast. I'm Senator Jake Merrick. And on today's episode, I'm going to be looking at some of the bills and resolutions I will be filing for the upcoming 2022 session. Today, I'm going to take a look at some of those that relate to the issue of abortion, the very sensitive issue of abortion.
This is the Jake for the State podcast, and this is the call for every red-blooded, God-fearing, liberty-loving patriot to prepare yourself, take your position,
stand your ground,
and advance the cause of freedom. Let's go.
Okay, it is January 13th, and a nice balmy 40 degrees outside. 38 actually. So, last few days I've actually, been really struggling with some congestion and coughing, and it seems to be circulating, going around. Of course, it seems like the cry is Omicron and COVID. And so our family got hit. All of us for a few days were under the weather, and we kind of took the weekend to rest and recover, watch a few movies. We didn't go get tested because we were just coughing and sneezing, and that's typically what happens when it gets 30 degrees outside. So we just took some rest, spent some time in prayer, ate some chicken noodle soup, and we are back running and gunning again. So if you are out there struggling, then God bless you. I encourage you to do the same. Take some time, rest, recover. Don't freak out. Don't let this loud narrative stimulate fear inside of you. I will admit, I noticed my internal dialogue. I don't know if I should call it dialogue or monologue. I'm talking to myself. But this internal communication, this internal thinking saying, what is this? What if this is COVID? How far will this go? All these things that you start asking yourself, and should I be doing about it? Should I go get tested for the sake of others? Should I let everybody know? Should I make a public service announcement to the world that I'm not feeling well? I think that we've gone off the deep end in many ways when we think about health and our response to our personal well-being. And so I want to just encourage you to use common sense. It's worked for the last however many thousand years. Just use common sense. Take care of yourself in the first place, okay? So let me emphasize this. I practice a lifestyle of health, of good nutrition, of the daily discipline of exercise, and all of this benefits me, especially when I get sick, okay? Those kind of things often prevent illness and prevent sickness, but it doesn't always guarantee it. Sometimes you just get sick anyway. But your body's ability to respond and rebound is greatly magnified and accelerated. And so I'm able to usually bounce back pretty quickly. I did get COVID last year. I was pretty sure it was COVID because I lost my taste and smell. I did end up getting tested and tested positive, but that doesn't mean too much for me because I believe these tests are they're shooting out all these false positives. So I don't think the tests are accurate, and I wouldn't rely on a test to tell me whether I had COVID or not. I did get tested. There was something going on in our life that we were needing that test. I think it was for maybe school or something like that. So we went ahead and did it. I was curious too, and I did test positive. So I believe I did have COVID last year, but honestly for me, it was about 3 or 4 days of feeling just a little sluggish, no taste, no smell, which actually was the worst part of it because I couldn't taste my coffee, and it was kind of pointless other than the caffeine. So it's a great diet actually, because you find out how much you're actually going to food for taste and not because you actually need the nutrition. So dealt with that for a few days, and my wife actually, she suffered for about 2 weeks, had the severe symptoms. Just to highlight her, she is the ultimate warrior. She's a walking miracle. We'll go over her testimony one day, but she struggled, and her cardiologist notified her whenever COVID was just breaking out and said, stay inside. Whatever you do, do not get COVID. If you get COVID, you probably will die. My wife has a cardiac issue, and it's resulted in pulmonary hypertension. So her lungs have been damaged in the process. And so very sensitive situation for her. And so we had to have this conversation about what is going to be our response. How are we going to live? Are we simply going to hole up and wait for the government to tell us the emergency is over? Or are we going to trust God, live by faith, take precautions? And so that's ultimately what we did. She wore a mask going to the store to get groceries. She did limit her time out. And this is all in the initial outbreak of COVID. None of us really knew what to think about it, if it was as bad as everybody was saying, if it was going to get worse. My wife in particular, along with others who had these conditions that made them more vulnerable, had a lot more question marks because they're just more vulnerable, especially to a virus that was attacking the lungs. So we ended up taking precautions. Here's what we did not do. My wife and I together, we talk and pray about almost everything. But what we did not do was say, we expect everyone else to adjust their lives because we're at risk. You know, we didn't get mad at other people for going outside or not wearing a mask because she has pulmonary hypertension and is high risk. See, that's not the response. If you're high risk, you're responsible for you and you make the adjustment. You don't expect the world to adjust to you. That's not the way it works, at least not in a free country. People are free to live their lives, and so are you. And you're free to take whatever risk you feel you need to take to live the life that you want to live. And so if you don't want to hole up in your house and quarantine for the rest of your life, then there's a certain amount of risk you're going to have to take. Of course, you take a risk getting out on the road, just leaving your house, you're at risk. And that risk may be elevated at certain times and in certain places, but that's your choice. We don't expect the world to adapt and adjust to us. So we did that, and she got out. I didn't intend to talk about COVID today. It just kind of flows, and that's what I do on this podcast, is I flow sometimes and go with it. But this is what we did. We got COVID, overcame it in spite of all of the precautions my wife took. She did get COVID too, and tested positive, suffered for 2 weeks, was in pain, laid in bed, did the same thing, got rest. We prayed over her and ate chicken noodle soup, and she did what she had to do, and she recovered, and now she's doing great. Now, we've had friends and family who have died, and actually I have a friend right now, his father's in the hospital, and we're praying for him, even after what seems to be diminishing symptoms with those who get COVID, with the Omicron not being as severe and things like that. Still, there are those like my friend's father who he's suffering and is very high risk in ICU. And so we're praying and covering him. Never at one time did I ever say COVID is not real or that it doesn't threaten some people's lives. But we do look at the overall picture that there's a less than 1% mortality rate, and there are real solutions out there. Not only were we talking about ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine and these different options other than the vaccine, but we're talking about vitamin D, vitamin C, zinc, quercetin, all these other things that we can be taking in advance in a preventative way to ensure that our immune system is boosted and we are less vulnerable, less likely to contract it in the first place. But if we do, our body is able to bounce back and respond. I'm drinking, this is called Immunity Aid. They don't sponsor the show, and I'm not promoting them necessarily, but just an example is that, I'm drinking this morning because it's got a lot of vitamin C, zinc, magnesium, D3, vitamin A, and it's great for your immune system. So even though I'm feeling great right now, I'm still taking this to keep my immune system boosted. So it's kind of a daily thing and a lifestyle approach rather than just something I do whenever there's an outbreak of something. So that's what I would encourage you all to do, is take care of yourself, whether you're feeling good or not. Take care of yourself all the time. And yeah, we'll all be happier and better off. So moving on, I want to give a shout out to Facebook today. Yes, I know that Facebook has taken a lot of heat, but I want to actually give them a shout out because if it were not for Facebook, I would not be as motivated to actually start this podcast. And so thank you, Facebook, for this amazing message you sent me the other day on my campaign page, the Jake for the State page. The message in bold with an exclamation mark was, "Don't lose your page." Thank you, Facebook, for alerting me to this. You said, if you get a few more community standards violations, you could lose Jake for the State Senate forever. Nobody wants that. Help out by peeling violations you disagree with, but more importantly, try to share content that follows the rules. Thank you, Facebook, for that notification that I really don't want you or need you, and for motivating me to start this podcast and continue it and grow it so I don't need you as a platform to get my message out. Thank you, Facebook. You have been an inspiration and motivation to me to change and to move away from my dependence on your communist platform. I just want to give you a good shout out. And I want to encourage all of you to possibly think about the same thing, about moving away from platforms that censor and restrict you from speaking freely. And yeah, what more can we say? I have 20 bills that I have either filed or they're in draft. They're being drafted. And so today I want to look at this issue of abortion. And for years, the issue of abortion has been it's been a rallying cry for conservatives. We all agree abortion should be ended. And it's been this place of unity for years. But in recent years, it is actually, the conservative camp has been divided because of the rising call for abolition, the immediate end of abortion without the pro-life, the traditional pro-life incremental approach of slowly ending abortion. There's been how many pro-life bills passed? There's been over 40 pro-life bills that have been passed in Oklahoma since 1973. And abortion is still alive and well in Oklahoma. So it should cause us to pause and say, are these truly effective? What is the real agenda here? And, for many, they have not questioned this. If it has a pro-life stamp on it, then you got my vote. That is the MO, that has been the MO of most politicians, most people running for office, is to simply put pro-life on their flyers to get the endorsement of Oklahomans for Life. And if you have those two things, then most conservatives around the state will give them their stamp of approval and vote for them. But it's not that simple anymore, because we've looked at the issue, and this was new to me 2 years ago. I was actually running for Congress in Oklahoma's 5th district, and I was presented with this idea of abolition, something I'd never really heard of or thought of. I simply was in the camp of pro-life, that I want to end abortion like everybody else. And so I'm pro-life. I was promoting myself as pro-life. But I met someone who introduced me to this concept of abolition. And it's something I want to introduce you to if you haven't heard of it. And it was the immediate and absolute end of abortion. And I said, well, yeah, exactly. I mean, that's what I believe. I'm pro-life. But they began to explain this to me, that there's a difference now between pro-life and abolition. Pro-life would say, yes, we want to end abortion. We agree with that abortion is horrendous and heinous and should be ended. It's the termination of human life. So we must end it. But we can't. We're restrained because of Roe versus Wade. We're restrained because of the Supreme Court ruling. So we can only do what we can do. We have to work within the confines of the law. And we're going to work on modifying and adjusting our laws so that we can limit abortion. And that is essentially the agenda of the pro-life movement, is to limit abortion. Now that can sound good, and it has for me, and at times, even today, I have to think about it and reorient myself, because you say, well, it's law. It's law that abortion is now legal. So what can we do to limit abortion and save as many babies as possible? If we can't save them all, let's save as many as possible. And that seems to make sense until you start drilling down and thinking about it. Okay, so let me present this to you. This scenario, I call it Pharaoh's Law. So imagine in a crazy world. I know that it's hard to do because we don't live in a crazy world, right? Just kidding. We're in a very crazy world. So imagine in this crazy world we live in that there's something called Pharaoh's Law that's instituted. And because the world population has exceeded our ability to sustain itself, we're limited on our crop production. We just don't have enough food or clean air for everyone. So we're in a dire place, and this is all hypothetical, right? Okay, just reminding you. We're in a dire place as a society, as a country, as a world, and we must think about how we can limit population. This is not that far off from the way some people think. So if that ever takes root and that becomes mainstream and people start thinking this might actually be a good idea, much like this socialist argument, then you could see that there could be a radical law presented. I don't know, maybe as radical as the Green New Deal. And it may say, we must now, if you have a child 2 years and under, we have to determine which ones we must let live. And there's a filtering process, and if they don't meet this checklist of those that are most likely to succeed and contribute to society, then their lives must be ended for the good of the whole. Okay, now we know it's not ideal, but for the good of the whole and the whole world and for the country, we must do this. And so Pharaoh's Law is passed that if you have a child 2 years old and under, and they don't meet all of these list of ideal requirements to be a contributing member of society, their life must be terminated. So bring those children to such and such location, and they will be peacefully terminated. Crazy. But more and more a possibility. Now, say that you say, that's insane. I mean, all of a sudden there's a pro-toddler movement, right? A pro-baby movement. And this pro-baby movement says, no, this is wrong. But the Supreme Court just ruled that Pharaoh's Law is now the law of the land. So, I mean, we have to abide by the law. So you have to bring your babies, but we're going to work towards ending this. That we can't let this happen. And so we're going to pass legislation that says, those that are 1 year old and older must not be subject to this law. And there's debate back and forth and everything, but eventually that is passed. And so, wow, praise God. We saved those 1 year old, but those between 1 year old and 2 years old. It was going to be all of those 2 years old and under, but now because of the pro-baby movement, the pro-toddler movement, those from 1 year old to 2 year old are saved. And there's celebration across the land because we saved those. Now, unfortunately, those that are 1 year old and younger that have been born, you still have to take those and terminate their life because, I mean, that's what the Supreme Court said. But hey, next session, we're going to come in and we're going to try to expand those guidelines and say, we're going to try to add to that list so it might include more toddlers that we can save. And there becomes a rallying cry. And now the movement is we're going to save as many toddlers as possible. We can't save them all because, the Supreme Court ruled this is the law of the land. So unfortunately, there are going to be some toddlers that we have to take to the local termination facility and they're going to have to be disposed of. But man, we are working and we're doing a great job. And hey, the governor just signed this into law. So he's actually the most pro-baby, pro-toddler governor in history. And so he celebrated while we are also taking these little babies, injecting them with a substance and watching their life fade from them. And we wish we didn't have to do it, but the Supreme Court said. So, unfortunately, we have to, but we're going to continue to work to save as many as possible. Now, if that doesn't break your heart and enrage you about even the possibility, then we're not on the same page. And we are not friends. So here's the thing. This is the argument. This is what we're dealing with in the pro-life movement. And I hope you can see that. The scenario I just presented to you is one that dealt with those that are already born. The issue of abortion is dealing with those that are not yet born. I don't care which side of the womb this baby is on, it's human life we're talking about. At what stage of development is human life sacred and worthy of saving? I would argue, as soon as there is human life, it must be protected. When is that? Well, as soon as the sperm fertilizes the egg, there begins the process, there begins human life. There's where the development of that human life process begins. So from that point on, from the fertilization of the sperm into the egg, that life must be protected. It does not matter if they feel pain yet. It does not matter if there's a heartbeat yet. It's human life. And to end that human life is murder. Now, don't go any further than that. Don't try to muddy the waters with, but what if? Keep it simple. That is human life. It will begin to develop. And it's our obligation to protect that life at every stage. If it gets to a place of 90 years old or 100 years old and is fragile and it is drawing on resources of the state to preserve that life, so be it. We don't end a life prematurely simply because it's hard or because there are, this person may be suffering. No, we say we must protect human life. And so the argument of abolition is simply that is where it begins and ends. And if that is true, then we must protect it. And it does not matter what the Supreme Court said, what the Supreme Court has ruled. They've ruled wrongly in Roe versus Wade. They've ruled wrongly. They have violated the God-given inalienable right to life. And they violated our Constitution, which declares that we have an inalienable right to life. So the Supreme Court is wrong in their ruling. And we must defer to the supreme law of the land, which is the Constitution, not an interpretation of the Constitution, which is faulty, but the actual Constitution and God's Word. That is what we must refer to. I voted against 4 pro-life bills last session. I was only in session for a month and a half because I was elected and sworn in April 14th. But in that short time, we were presented with 4 pro-life bills. And I'm fairly new to this abolitionist argument. And I tell you what, the hardest thing I did as a senator last session was to hear this piece of legislation being presented that would save some babies in Oklahoma if it were passed and signed into law. It was the heartbeat bill. And as I'm sitting there on the Senate floor at my desk with the buttons labeled yes and no, green and red, in front of me, I know I'm faced with a very significant choice. If I vote against this bill, will I be saying that I will not do whatever it takes to save some? But if I vote yes, will I be agreeing that there are some, those without a heartbeat, that are disposable simply because they don't yet have a heartbeat? And I've heard the arguments back and forth, and I've actually campaigned on these arguments, the abolitionist stance that all life is sacred and that we must take a hard stance. But when I'm given this opportunity and option to vote in favor of a bill that might save some, it became a very sobering moment. And it was the day of reckoning. It was the day of decision of where do you truly stand? And there was a wrestle on the floor. In spite of everything I'd said and campaigned on, there was still in that moment a fight within me about what is right. And I tell you, I go to God in prayer, much like Nehemiah, whenever he knew the decision he had to make as the cupbearer of the king to advocate for Jerusalem in the rebuilding of the walls. The king asked him, "What's the matter?" And that was the moment of decision for Nehemiah. Does he risk his life in disrupting the king's peace? And he says he prayed to God. And it was a quick internal prayer, I'm sure, that Nehemiah just said, "Lord, help me." And in that moment, the Lord responded and gave him the strength and courage he needed to do what was right. And I did the same thing on the Senate floor as I said, "Lord, help me. Help me know what is right here." And the Lord gave me the courage to do what was right, and I voted no against this bill, knowing it could be political suicide, knowing there would be people who voted for me who wouldn't understand why I would vote against a heartbeat bill. But I did what I believed was right, according to God's law and according to the Constitution. That if I voted for this heartbeat bill, what I'm implying is there are still those babies who aren't worth saving, who I can't save. But I said, you know what? I'm going to be a voice for those babies. I'm going to say it's wrong to kill all babies. It's wrong to end all human life. And I'm not going to compromise with that. And of course, it came out immediately after that I was not truly pro-life. And I know that'll be used against me in the upcoming campaign, is that how could I truly say I'm conservative and pro-life if I voted against 4 pro-life bills? Well, that's the reason, ladies and gentlemen. Because we have gone past that day of compromise. We are not in a day where we can compromise any longer. There's a call for the immediate end of abortion. If anywhere in the world, at least in the state of Oklahoma, will declare it's wrong to end human life. So getting to some of the bills that I'm proposing. So, I have 20 that I'm proposing this session, and I'll get through all those in the upcoming episodes. The first one I presented was called the Day of Tears resolution. And this was something that was proposed to me and to other legislators, and I immediately, it resonated with me, excited me, and felt it was necessary. So I took it on and submitted this as a resolution to be presented in the upcoming session. And I'll just read this to you because it's fairly short. The resolution is called the Day of Tears resolution, and it says, whereas on January 22nd, 1973, the majority of the members of the Supreme Court ruled that abortion was a right secured by the Constitution. And whereas, since that fateful day, over 62 million unborn children have perished. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the state that January 22nd hereby be recognized as the Day of Tears in Oklahoma, and that the citizens of Oklahoma be encouraged to lower their flags to half-staff to mourn the innocents who have lost their lives to abortion. So it's simply a declaration that since Roe versus Wade, January 22nd, 1973, 62 million babies have been aborted and murdered in America. And it's a call to recognize this and to mourn this. And so it's called the Day of Tears, where we lower our flags to half-mast in recognition of this across the state. I think it would be a very powerful message. I know whenever I see a flag lowered, I may not know why, and so I look it up. You can Google that, say, why is the flag at half-mast today? And it'll pop up why. And so I can imagine that on January 22nd, people see flags at half-mast and start asking, why are they lowered? And the conversation then is out. And, hey, this is the Day of Tears. We're mourning that 62 million babies have been aborted. So I believe it's a powerful message we can send as a state, and we can generate more conversation and awareness of this issue. I also have a call to action resolution, and I'm not going to read the whole thing because it's very lengthy, but essentially it is calling out the Supreme Court, saying that they have adjudicated wrongly in the Roe versus Wade decision, and that we will not submit to something, a ruling of a court, even if it's the Supreme Court, if it violates God's law and our Constitution. We swore an oath, this is what this resolution says in summary, is that we swore an oath to the Constitution that says we have certain inalienable rights guaranteed by God and protected by law, and this includes life. And if a Supreme Court ruling undermines that right to life, they are in violation of the Constitution of the United States. And so we are not obligated to recognize that ruling if that ruling violates the Constitution. And so we as a state will say, no, we do not recognize that ruling. And this resolution calls for the governor to take executive action and declare abortion illegal in Oklahoma, to call for the sheriffs in every county to disallow abortions, for the highway patrol to blockade and disallow people entering abortion facilities, to strip doctors of license who are performing abortions, and to hold those accountable in court if they violate this law instituted in Oklahoma. So it's a very straightforward, powerful resolution that I'm presenting. It's a joint resolution with the House, and it also recognizes a resolution that was passed in the House, and I'm drawing a blank on the date, but it was passed in the House in years prior that actually said the same thing and recognized this. And so a very powerful resolution. I'll be posting the details of this. It's actually still in drafting, so as soon as it's finalized, I'll do a press release and I'll post it so you can see it and read it in more detail. And then finally, what I'm going to propose is an amendment to our homicide code in Oklahoma, our homicide law. And basically, it strikes out the provisions for abortion. So let me read this. It says in section 691A, homicide is the killing of one human being by another. Human being includes an unborn child as defined in section 1-730 of Title 63 of the Oklahoma Statutes. Abortion means the act of using or prescribing an instrument, drug, medicine, or any other substance, device, or means with the intent to cause the death of an unborn child, which shall not include instances in which an unborn child dies by natural causes. Point 3, unborn child or unborn person means the unborn offspring of human beings from the moment of fertilization and until live birth, including the development stages of human conceptus, the zygote, morula, blastocyst, embryo, and fetus. And fertilization means the fusion of the human sperm with the human ovum. So in section C, it says homicide shall include, but not be limited to, acts which cause the death of an unborn child committed during an abortion. So very strong. I know this will be very much debated, but I'm looking at revising our homicide definition to remove provisions for homicide via abortion and to include abortion as an act of murder. Very bold, very strong language, very necessary, and very much in line with, I believe, science, the Bible, and the Constitution. So I'd love to hear any feedback from you on that. I hope that this will be heard. And I know that Senator Hamilton has also submitted an abolitionist bill. I hope these bills will be given an audience and a chance to be voted on. So I'm going to wrap up today's episode. I'll be talking some more about this. Obviously, it's something I'm very passionate about, but it's something that's very necessary, a very needed conversation in our state. And so the question is, what will Oklahoma do about this? We're not waiting to see what Joe Biden is going to do. We kind of know what he's probably going to do. We're not going to wait on a Supreme Court ruling. We're going to say, hopefully in Oklahoma, this is what's right. We're going to do what's right rather than what a Supreme Court ruling has said is right when that Supreme Court ruling is wrong. All right. Well, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for joining me for this second episode. I hope it was worth your time. I hope it was edifying and educational. I'd love to hear feedback from you. Please, if you can, subscribe. If you're watching this on YouTube, subscribe on Rumble or any other platform. You can find this podcast on Apple, on Google Play, on Spotify, on SoundCloud, YouTube, and Rumble. So hope you join, but please subscribe and share. That way we can get the word out, grow the audience, and reach more people. So God bless you guys. God bless America, and God bless Oklahoma.